Hey, what's up, Fantasy Heads? This is Mitchell with FF Real Talk, and 2 weeks for fantasy down the books, and a lot of us were discussing how week one was awful, and week two was nearly as bad, if not worse. A lot of big injuries that were catastrophic for teams is what happened more than anything else, and continued lack of performance, in particular with a lot of early pick running backs. But this is the nature of fantasy, y'all. It's just how it goes. You can just do the best you can in terms of assumptions, but it don't matter how well you draft. The players have got to play when it comes to this game. So a lot of people are overreaching or panicking or wondering should they cut bait of this player or that player. As I said last week, not before week 3 or 4 ends. If your number one running back, your number two running back should not be cut at this point. So hold tight as long as they're not injured. Hold tight right now. Give them a week, possibly another 2 weeks to see what they're doing. But this is just that point where some people have gotten off to a good start, some people haven't, but no one's out of it yet. So just hold tight, see what happens, and a lot's going to determine over the next 2 weeks in terms of your fantasy team and how good it is. But these videos are all about making your team better, and without further ado, we're going to get into it for the week week 3 preview of the players that you should be adding. And my number one add of this week is Dion Lewis. He was honorable mention last week. I think he was honorable mention, and it was because I don't trust New England running backs, and I never really have. But he looks to be the real deal. And though I don't trust New England backs, it's because he's assuming a role of a player that was trustworthy in fantasy, in particularly PPR, and that's Shane Vereen. This guy in 2 straight weeks has shown what you can do on the ground as well as in the passing game. And with LeGarrette Blount coming out and not doing anything after his suspension, his role is not going to be diminished. You got to run somebody, you got to use somebody. So it looks like this situation is going to be serious. And with this team poised for another Super Bowl run, the way they're looking right now, they're definitely going to be using them and taking advantage. So after this week, Lewis needs to be 100% owned, and not just now, for the rest of the season. So that's why he's the number one, because a lot of waiver ads are players that will help you during bye weeks or help you a few weeks until X player comes back or Y player comes back. This guy looks like he has rest of the season value. So that's why you want Dion Lewis. Number 2, Matt Jones. There was a lot of preseason talk from some of the guys that I listened to about Matt Jones and how explosive he looked during the preseason and in workouts and in training camp. And I was just waiting to see what he was going to do. And in week 2, he went off. 19 carries for 122 yards with two TD, which was one more carry more than Alfred Morris. So what that tells you is, at least in that second week, they had a split even load of carries. Morris is extremely dependable and extremely solid. So that caps Matt Jones's value in a sense. He's not going to assume the starting role anytime soon unless there's an injury or unless something else comes about where Morris doesn't perform. Morris usually doesn't have the doesn't perform tag. He usually does what he does. But this is a situation that both of them are capped. So if you own Morris, you should be trying to target Jones, but Jones also has a lot of standalone value. Neither are flashy, neither are extremely used in the passing game, and Matt Jones at Florida wasn't used that much as a pass catcher, and Alfred Morris doesn't. But all Morris owners should own him. Plus, he has some standalone value. So Matt Jones, and he looked really good out there. So Matt Jones should be somebody that will be a popular ad this week. Number 3, Tyrod Taylor. Mariota this, Winston that. A lot of people were on the bandwagon of those 2 rookie quarterbacks. But the truth is, they shouldn't have got any of the hype or the boos they got because they're just going through growing pains like all rookie quarterbacks are going to go. But Tyrod Taylor is looking like something a little bit different. He's starting to resemble what Kaepernick looks like at his best, or even some early signs of what Michael Vick looks like. He's got explosive feet. It's like he's real quick with it. Now he's making his mistakes out there, as well as the 3 touchdowns he had, 3 interceptions, and that's a rookie quarterback. That's what's gonna happen. But it's looking like he's constant points on the board and can do so much. And Buffalo needs him extremely bad. It looks like now he's solidified the job. You can't go back after you see 2 performances like that. So if you're a Tony Romo owner, or any Jay Cutler owner, or any of these other quarterbacks who are giving you problems or out or underperforming, it looks like Tyrod Taylor is going to be a consistent 15 or more fantasy points a week. So this is a guy you want to add, because I'm going to be targeting him in a few leagues. So Tyrod Taylor, keep an eye out on that, and it's going to be close. If he has a couple more weeks of this, he's going to be fully owned. So try to jump in early. Number 4, Devonte Freeman. It's as simple as this. As long as rookie Tevin Coleman is out, Freeman is a must-own player. He's not as much of a runner as Coleman is, but in PPR, he's extremely viable and extremely good flex option week to week. I don't know how long Coleman's going to be out. It seems like they're saying a couple weeks he's got a broken rib, so it's just iffy with those types of things. But Freeman, again, in PPR, if you're needing somebody to add to your flex, and over the next few weeks while Coleman's out, he's going to not only be viable, he's going to be a consistent contributor to PPR. And for daily fantasy players, this is that type of player that can come out of nowhere and be the guy that can help prompt you into the money side, because you can get them for cheap on DFS for price. And that's how you want to play DFS. You want to grab players that no one else is thinking of, that are inexpensive and they might go off. He's got that type of potential. But in terms of basic fantasy, every week flex while Coleman is out. It'd be somebody you might want to think about. Number 5, Michael Crabtree. Derek Carr is starting to come along, and Amari Cooper cannot get it all. And we're talking about a receiver that is super skilled. Plus, he knows how to play with quarterbacks that are learning and adjusting to playing in the league, i.e. when he was playing with Kaepernick and whatnot. He knows how to get it done. His only problem for years has been injury, and he can be somewhat of a diva at times. So it's just one of those things where his underachieving has kind of shadowed his talent, but looks like he's got some potential in this newfound offense. And it looks like Oakland's just looking they got a good momentum going, and it's looking pretty solid. So he has the potential to shine. And if you need a receiver out there, which a lot of us do, his learning curve is kind of low because, he's been here for a while. But at the same time, his learning curve is steady. He's going to be a solid pick. So I think that's a guy you'll want to grab in terms of receivers. He will be the first receiver of this pack I would grab. Number 6. David Johnson. Last week, he was an honorable mention along with Chris Johnson. They were like you can go ahead and drop Chris Johnson from the part of this honorable mention thing, because David is now in the list and Chris Johnson is whatever. Like I say, he's done as far as I'm concerned. But he stands, like I say, Johnson stands alone this week. It's funny that he has Andre Ellington's skill set, meaning quick feet, and he's an excellent pass catcher. But the difference, the positive difference, is the fact that he's 6'1" and 225 pounds. That gives him a much better chance of surviving the NFL game, because Ellington's always hurt. You see it. Anytime you draft him, you're taking a risk. Johnson has more of a big body, and he's got that dual threat out there. So he was an upside pick in all my drafts. In all of my 10 teams, I targeted him towards the end as my upside guy that I was getting towards the end of drafts. And it's looking like it just might pay off. Ellington's out. Chris Johnson, though they might be declaring him the starter, is not going to be putting up anything. Sooner than not, David Johnson is not only going to be a solid option, he's got the potential to end up in the top 20 to 25 area of running backs this year or better. So this is a guy with 3 down potential and should be fully owned very soon. Number 7, Travis Benjamin. The Browns have got to throw it to somebody. And surprise, surprise, Johnny Manziel had this week where, okay, let's see, will this be the one where he looks like an NFL quarterback? And he kind of did, had a pretty good game. It was real solid. And it's looking like through 2 weeks, Benjamin is the guy they want to use. Now, he's not being targeted a lot. And he's making us, some of those fluke play touchdowns. But the thing is, he reminds me sort of Martavis Bryant, where he just makes touchdowns and doesn't get targeted a lot. The only problem is they've got no Big Ben at the quarterback position. So you're going to have to temper your expectations. But when you're putting fantasy numbers up on the board week straight, you got to pay attention to it. So if you don't target him this week, look at week 3 and see what he does. If he does any semblance of a touchdown and heavy yards again, he becomes a true must-own guy. But watch him, keep an eye out on him, and he's definitely a solid grab. He's probably better than some of y'all guys out there on your teams. So he isn't a waste, so keep an eye out on him as well. Number 8 is Eric Ebron. With the loss of Austin Seferian-Jenkins and the injury to Dwayne Allen, you might be very well scrounging the wire for a tight end pickup. Eric Ebron is only 20% owned in ESPN leagues. And over the first 2 games, he's got at least 40 yards and a touchdown in both games. And this is the crazy part, 17 targets. That's awesome for a tight end. He's somebody that you really need to own. I'm thinking of, pulling him and dropping some of the tight ends that I have, because it's looking like this thing is for real. Pettigrew, that's no longer a thing that's distracting this thing. It's sort of like with Tyler Eifert. He has the mantle and he's going to go. It looks like Eric Ebron's what we expected him or was hoping he would be last year is going to come to fruition. So if any of this continues, this is going to be a solid tight end to have. And for all Dwayne Allen owners, before you try to get Fleener or anything like that, look at Ebron. He's very heavily unowned, so you can get him. Number 9 is Ronnie Hillman. Mentioned him last week, and this situation as a whole is in the same vein, sort of like Justin Forsett with Baltimore. Early picks is just not doing what they should be doing. CJ Anderson is stinking up the place, just like Justin Forsett is. It's not all CJ's fault, because he's behind a piecemeal line that doesn't know what they're doing. But even with that offensive line, Hillman is performing slightly better. It ain't stark, but it's slightly better. And for all CJ owners, I told y'all last week that sooner than not, I anticipate the Ronnie Hillman possibly taking over. Because again, I said last week, CJ was the aftermath of Ronnie Hillman's takeover, and he was doing good. So if CJ's fully healthy this week, and he doesn't turn it on this week, you might see the end of this hype. You might see the end. You might see the turning or changing of the guard of this. And you want to have Hillman on your bench, especially if you're a CJ owner. If this happens, you got to do whatever you got to do to own Hillman if you're a CJ Anderson owner. Don't let this thing turn into a bust. Somebody's got to run the ball. So if you own CJ and it becomes a bust, if you have Hillman on the back end, the bust becomes less. Do it. Do it the best you can to get him, somehow, some way. And number 10, James Starks. You think Dallas has the injury bug and the bad luck for it. They're not, to me, though they lost Dez for quite a bit of time and Tony Romo for quite a bit of time, they're nothing like what's happening with Green Bay. They're just getting injury bitten from beginning to everyone. Everyone is. Randall Cobb's a bit hurt. Jordy Nelson is out, and their number 1 running back has an ankle problem now. James Starks is 100% tied to Eddie Lacy, whether he plays or whether he doesn't. The good news is James Starks has had a level of success when he does have the ball and when he's out there. He provides decent value when he gets the chance to run. He's experienced and he's used to this team's concept and has been a fantasy producer in the past. But again, it's 100% tied to Eddie Lacy and what he does or doesn't do. But for all Eddie Lacy owners, you should have James Starks as a handcuff. My whole thing about handcuffs, just a quick sidebar, I'm not really big on handcuffs, but handcuffs are something I do when I see a player get his first injury of the year. Because what you got to know is injuries, especially ones that they try to come back from quickly, are often still there. Even if Eddie Lacy plays this week, that ankle injury is going to be a problem for upcoming weeks. So that means he has the potential to go down again, and you want to have his handcuffs. So for a player like CJ, is a little nicked up, you want to have Hillman. A player like Eddie Lacy, who's already got nicked up, you want to have Starks. I don't hold handcuffs or like with somebody like Arian Foster, who always is hurt, you want to have, Alfred Blue isn't doing anything, so, but anyway, I digress. But the main thing is, when it comes to handcuffs, I don't hold them until there's a reason to. This is a reason to. Get James Starks if you own Eddie Lacy. His standalone value is but he's week-to-week usage depending on Lacy. So he's somebody you want to have, especially if you have him. Honorable mention, Jameis Winston. He had the bad first game, had the good second game, showed his skills and instincts, and he's only going to get better. But the loss of Austin Seferian-Jenkins, I can't stress how bad that is. He has now lost his security blanket. So we're going to see him have to learn to throw it down the field in the NFL. So temper expectations, but it serves as a decent bye week fill-in because the byes are about to start coming in. Lorenzo Taliaferro. As I mentioned earlier, Justin Forsett is underachieving, sort of like C.J. Anderson is. And though Lorenzo Taliaferro is often heavily touchdown dependent, he's one of those vulture guys that tends to steal them in the red zone. He's decent and dependable for fantasy when he gets the chance to succeed. And we've seen him have moderate success. So keep an eye out on Justin Forsett more than anything else. He's one of them early picks that's not performing. They got to get it from somebody. So if he doesn't turn it on soon, they'll be turning to Taliaferro. So keep an eye out on him. This next one, Carson Palmer is only 60% owned in leagues. If by the close of business on Friday, Carson Palmer isn't 100% owned, I'm losing faith in all of y'all, in the whole fantasy community as a whole. That's it. Carson Palmer needs to be owned. And I'm talking about top 6 owned. Stop playing. Get him. And number 14, Johnny Manziel. Do we really need to discuss him or why? Well, I mean, I think now he at least certainly has the starting gig, no matter what the team says. And with his dual threat possibilities, with his feet and his skill set and his athleticism, for those who are desperate at quarterback, he's somebody exciting to have because he looks like he's somebody who may have the option of putting up some decent numbers at times. And it seems like he's turned his life around. So that could result in positive usage out there. But I temper the expectations, especially when out there, Teddy Bridgewater's out there, Blake Bortles is out there, Andy Dalton's heavily not on, Joe Flacco's heavily not on. So it's kind of more of a fun thing that I have him as honorable mention. This is honorable mention mostly is keep an eye out on, except Carson Palmer. Y'all need to own him. I just honorable mentioned him because it shouldn't even be talked about because I mentioned him last week. But with Johnny Manziel, it's just a fun thing. He might get it going, he might not. But keep an eye out on him. He'll probably be a fun person to own. But anyway, that's it for the list. And hope everybody's fantasy season is going well. And and I'm having moderate success, good in some leagues, suck in other leagues, but it's going to turn around. Again, we're just 2 weeks into the season, about to head into week 3. Keep your head up, keep your momentum positive, but scour the wire and don't be too attached to a player that you already drafted or too scared to make a move. This is and also another thing. Watch for people that try to offer you bad trades. Just be wary of it. If this is that time where people are testing you, I mentioned this last week, but I'm going to say it again. Time where people are throwing out nothing for your C.J. Anderson, nothing for your Justin Forsett. And you might be tempted to do it. I've gotten people asking me, should I drop this guy? Should I drop that guy? And this is probably their second running back, their number 2. Not yet. Said it in the beginning of the video, 3-4 weeks is the point where you want to start, where you make hasty decisions. So give it another week, possibly 2, and things will turn around. You'll start seeing what your team really is by week 4. So, but that's it for this video, and we'll see you next time. Y'all have a good week. All right.